most of the people that I interview on this show are comics, but not all of them. And you write like a comic. I really liked how you would have little punchlines in the footnotes, and it was really the pace was, you know, never slowed down, and there was no fluff. And my question, I guess I can make this a question, is
Yep.
I think that comes from a journalism background where there's no time for a bunch of adverbs, or is that just you?
I think, you know, it's funny, but first of all, I love when I read nonfiction. If it's not funny, I get bored really quickly. And so I definitely set out to write more of a funny book than a serious book. I am not a comedy writer though, per se. So I think you know, as an editor at VF for so long, I worked with so many different kinds of writers, and you know, a lot of serious journalism, but also a lot of just writers with sort of wicked tone and just great turns of phrase. A.A. Gill was one of them. Rich Cohen was another one. I'm sure I'm missing a bunch. Henry Alford, who did a lot of sort of short humor pieces for us. And I ripped off like their writing style completely for my book. Like, I will just sort of admit it. I leaned on what I learned from a lot of these writers. But also I do write screenplays. And in fact, this book, and I put it in the sort of afterword, I wrote a pilot about 10 years ago, and it was called Disappearing Ink. And it was set in the present day, and it was set in a sort of collapsing print business with a middle-aged magazine editor, sort of loosely based on myself, sort of just dealing with this existential crisis of like, oh my God, I've worked 20 years, worked my way up in this business, and now this business is dying, and I'm being replaced by 25-year-olds who know how to use computers, unlike me. So and as far as sort of the screenwriting goes, I much prefer comedy, and I feel very comfortable in that space. And that show was a comedy. I actually have in finishing up a comedy, a film I wrote also that's also a comedy that I'm finishing up right now. So I think a lot of that comes from the screenwriting, and you know, as you were saying, it's like screenwriting and prose writing are such different things, and you are trying to be so economical with words in a screenplay. You know, you're not having these giant, it's sort of the first thing you learn is like, you know, no pieces of dialogue unless it's a big important speech over, you know, 4 or 5 lines. Like, how do you get everything into that? How do you get a punchline? How do you get a setup and a joke and a punchline into as little space as possible? And I think I'm comfortable writing screenplays and humor, and I just tried to sort of take that approach to the book.
Yeah, it definitely felt like reading a visual medium, if that makes sense. You know, there were little scenes, the photo shoots at 44, and you saw the kind of Sorkin-esque like bustle in the office.
Yeah.
And
no, I definitely I was taking a cinematic approach. Like, I absolutely was writing these scenes as if I was writing a scene for a TV show or a film, you know, and by the way, with the end goal of hoping to turn this into a television show. You know, so it was, I mean, I got lucky that it seems to have turned out well, and it worked. But it was definitely the goal.
Can you walk me through the process of writing the memoir itself as someone who really struggles with nonfiction?
I mean, I sold this book. I was fired from VF in the end of the winter in 2018. And along with, I think there were like 25 of us were fired. And it's just what happens when a new editor comes in. They just sort of cleaned out this sort of previous regime, which I totally expected. I didn't plan on writing a memoir. It was not something I was going to do. I had a few television shows in development. I was like, oh, one of these will go. I'll be fine. And then a year later, you know, and first of all, and you know, you'll know this, but like, I was just completely like technologically aged out of the business. I was like overpriced. Like, no one was hiring a 47-year-old like print editor with an expense account and who drank as much as I did at lunch. Like they just weren't like, there weren't jobs for me. And I think when the VF run was over, I did think like, well, I'll get a job somewhere, but maybe I'll try this TV writing stuff for a while. And I had a show not go, and that I'd been thought was going to go. There were no jobs, and so sort of in a panic, I wrote a 30,000 page proposal. I talked
30,000 words.
30,000 words. Yeah.
Okay.
So I wrote a massive proposal. I think there were like 3 fully formed chapters in there. The introduction that's in the book is roughly the introduction that I wrote for the book proposal. And I was sort of like in a panic. I like needed cash and I needed something to do. And so I sold it relatively quickly. I was kind of surprised the reaction. I sold it to a publisher called Ballantine, which had just had success with Andre Leon Talley's book. And an editor there got my proposal and I think thought, well, people seem interested in this world and this business, so let's give it a shot. And it was once I sold it, the realization that now you have to write the thing was so overwhelming and like frightening to me that I literally didn't touch the book for probably 6 months after that. And I kept telling myself in my head, I was like, you know what, my proposal's 30,000 words. I'm contracted for 85 or 90. This will only take me a few months to do, which was really short-sighted and really stupid, because the deadline was sort of looming in the summer of 2020. And I really had not written much by the spring of 2020. So I just like buckled down and probably wrote the book in about first draft in about 3 months. And it was like total like panic, stream of consciousness, like up in the middle of the night, editing in the morning, like just finding moments and finding time to do it. But it was once you start doing it, it starts coming out. At least that's like the way. I need deadlines and I need panic.
That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah, I need deadlines and I need panic and I need as little time as possible and I can get it done. And it's unfortunate that is the way I write and the way I work. I wish I could be one of those writers who just like, I get up at 9, I write from 10 a.m. to 1, and then I go for a walk or a run, and then I write from 3 to 7. Like, I can't do that. I need panic and fear to sort of drive me.
But that's print energy, right? You're like, we gotta get this issue out.
It is. And it's funny because like you're right. And a book is so much more similar to print than what happened in the business. Now they do rush things and they get them online. And, I think the term I read years ago was process journalism, which is kind of scary. But I remember, I forget who it was who coined that phrase. And it's sort of scary for anyone who believes in journalism, but it was the idea of sort of like, you just get it out and get it out first. If there are mistakes in it, you fix them as you go along and you change them online. And the magazine, it was totally different. Like, it had to be perfect. Like, this was the final word. This was the public record. This is going out in the world. And that's what it's like for a book also. You know what I mean?
That's what makes SNL so special too, because there's no time delay at all. It's like, you better get this right or this is going to look really bad.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Everyone.
Exactly.
I rewatched Game of Thrones recently, and they took out that shot where they had the Starbucks cup.
Oh, the coffee cup. Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. I wonder how much that cost them. It probably cost them $100,000 or something.
Yeah, some prop masters out of work, I think.
Exactly.
I read another Vanity Fair memoir 10 years ago, and it was completely different in tone, very negative. It was the Toby Young. Yeah, How to Lose Friends and Alienate People. Did you know him? I did.
In fact, I made an appearance on the first page of that book. Toby, and I haven't seen Toby in years and years and years, and I always kind of liked Toby, but Toby, Toby was like, Graydon brought Toby over. Toby had started a magazine in London called The Modern Review, and it was kind of closer to Spy in tone than Vanity Fair, but Graydon was really impressed with him. He was a great writer and a great magazine editor. And so he brought him over, and when you're running something like Vanity Fair and you have that kind of power, at least back in the day when you have those kind of budgets and that kind of power, you could do things like that and be like, I like this kid, he's brilliant, I'm going to pay him and move him to New York. And it didn't, I think it was hard for Toby, who had been running his own magazine, to then be part of a staff. And he just never found his voice within the walls of Vanity Fair, and he never found his place. I think he's done really well. He went back to the UK. I think I don't know if he still is a restaurant critic, but he was a pretty successful restaurant critic for a while. And, but, sometimes, and this happened, it wasn't just Toby. I mean, it's hard to, a big part of like success is being able to like understand how to fit into a place and how you fit into a place and how to work with other people. And, I hate to say it takes a village, but it takes a village, I mean, it's really collaborative, and there's so many different steps along an editorial process from idea to sort of holding it in your hands. Yeah, and Toby had Toby succeeded and remained at Vanity Fair for his whole run, as I did, for Graydon's whole run, it probably would have been a different book. But it was a really fun, by the way, it was a really fun book. I remember going to the book party when Toby released it, and I thought it was a great read.
It's a funny name.
It's a great name, yeah.
Memoir stood out to me because, I read Devil Wears Prada, which I guess is autofiction, and I read that one, and I read In the Chiffon Trenches, and I really like that as well. But the first two were sort of, let's cut down the higher ups to try to move up. That was the vibe that I got, and you didn't do that at all, which I really respect.
I didn't.
Sure wanted you to.
Yeah, I mean, I never set out to write that kind of book. I mean, I was like, when I was hired, and you read the book, so you sort of know the whole backstory, I was like a complete fish out of water at that place. Like, I was just like an aimless 21-year-old kid. I'd gone to college for like 3 weeks, if that. And this opportunity was sort of dropped in my lap. I once compared it to the Jungle Book, and I was like Mowgli, who was like raised in the jungle by a bunch of wacky animals, and I really was, to some extent. I was like such a blank slate. I mean, I was hardworking, which is really all I had, and I grew into myself at that place, and all these people that there was a core group of people that were there for 25 years, that I worked with, that were like family, that I saw as much, if not more than my family. That, when we traveled to LA or the Cannes Film Festival, we would all sort of move in mass. There'd be 20 of us at the hotel, and we would just, and it really was family. And there was, listen, we didn't always get along or agree like any family. It could be a bit like Thanksgiving dinner occasionally, with sort of the drunk uncle and the madness of family. But I had no sort of axes to grind. I had a really good run, and I wanted to write a book that showed my appreciation for the time and the place. But I had kind of no interest in going after anyone. And so I didn't, and it heartens me that you say that, that you thought that was a nice thing. And that I think people the negative thing would have been so easy. You know what I mean? It's so easy to do that, to just trash everybody. And I really didn't want to do that. I trashed myself more than anybody else.
Like a comic.
Like a comic, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay,
next question. Is the truffle mac and cheese at the Waverly Inn worth the price tag? I think it's about $150.
It depends. And this is a lesson. My 12-year-old son has very expensive food tastes. And I teach him food lessons all the time. It is worth it if the truffles are white. It is not worth it if the truffles are black.
That's very
and
helpful.
we have like white truffle snobism in this house. White truffles are so much better than black truffles that like, and I think the black truffle version costs like $80. And when white truffles are in season in the fall, I think is when it goes up to 150. I think it's totally worth it. I think white truffles are always worth it, no matter the cost. Black truffles are never worth it, no matter the cost.
Spoken like someone with an expense account.
How's that? I know. How's that? It's, it's fun as I got to, I write about A.A. Gill in the book, who was like one of my dear friends and the first writer that I really worked with. And he unfortunately passed away, I think about 6 or 7 years ago. But he was sort of the most well-known restaurant critic in the UK. I mean, and he just a beautiful writer and just funny. And his restaurant reviews were, they were like 4/5 not about the restaurant. Like he would start off on these other tangents and write the whole restaurant review about something else, and then spend the last paragraph saying like food was okay, like it was never. And I got a call last week from Airmail, which is of course Greg and Carter's new-ish digital magazine, and they said, look, we want someone to go review this restaurant in Brooklyn. It was the Copenhagen restaurant Noma had a 5-night residency in New York, and it was outrageously expensive. It was like $700 a person, and they said, would you want to go review it? And you'd go on Tuesday night, you'd have to turn it in Thursday morning. So you'd literally have, less than 48 hours to do it. And I was kind of like, yes, I'll totally do it. Just so I could pretend I was A.A. Gill for a couple of days. So I got to go do my first restaurant review, which was published this weekend, which was like super exciting. And I ripped off Adrian's sort of like not writing about the restaurant. And I wrote mostly about doing ayahuasca. And I then tied it into the restaurant at the end.
How was ayahuasca?
I had a you have to read the review to see what happened on my ayahuasca journey. I don't know. I'm not like a joiner or a believer. And I think
in general or about this one drug?
Totally in general, like about everything. Like I just can't, like if a bunch of people are doing something and say that it changes their life, I'm like, whatever, you're full of shit. So it didn't. So anyway, I'm like such a skeptic. I go into everything with such a bad attitude. And I think that made the difference. So I didn't, whatever. I like doing psychedelics and recreational drugs occasionally, like anybody else. And so it was sort of worth it for the experience, but I didn't see God or anything like that.
Chelsea Handler has a show on Netflix. Chelsea Does Drugs, and have you seen that one? She does ayahuasca.
Oh no, but now I'm gonna go watch.
She has the same feeling where she's like, I like threw up a lot and kind of tripped out, but it didn't change my world.
Well, the joke about mine and why I kind of wanted to write about it is the second night I did it, I took like a massive dose compared to the first night, because the first night it sort of didn't do much for me.
Classic
and I took a huge mistake, and I like half an hour in, I was like, oh fuck, like I fucked up, shit, and now I'm stuck with this like existential dread and like this hellish feeling and like terror. It was like absolute terror. And I didn't purge the first night. Purge is the word they use, which is like part of the whole thing. It's like part of the experience is the purging, and it's getting rid of the contents of your soul that are dark.
They rebranded vomit.
Yeah, basically, yeah. They